Greetings. Last episode, we looked at the statistics from my putter testing. This time, in episode 20 of my hobby QuadCast, we'll be answering the question of, can I, in a non-statistical way, tell the difference between these two putters that were statistically tied, the trust putter and the null putter? To understand why I might prefer one putter over another, I should explain how I think putting works, because that's the basis on which I'm going to make my decision. There's a standard model that I think almost everyone agrees with that divides putting into three major components. The first is reading, where you look at the putting surface and decide how far, what direction and how hard you need to hit the ball for it to get to the hole. That doesn't involve the putter at all, so we'll forget about that. Once you've made that decision, though, about which direction and how hard, the putter does come into play. And we generally call which direction we're hitting it the line, and how hard we're hitting it the pace of the putter. I hope those terms make reasonable sense to you. The way I believe that getting the line right works is if the putter face, and I'll use a 3D printed model that someone else made. I'll try and remember to put a link in the description in case anyone's interested. If the face of the putter is at right angles to the direction I want the ball to go in at the point that it hits the ball, and it remains at right angles to that direction for as long as the two are in contact, then the ball will go off in the correct direction. The putter has influence on this in a few ways. First, and possibly most important from my point of view, if it's easier for me to see that I've got the putter set up at the correct angle initially before I take it back and hit the ball with it, that helps. The other thing that helps is if the putter head has what we call a high moment of inertia. So moment of inertia means how much it resists rotating when you apply a force away from the center. So the way putters are built, they generally all have the center marked. And if you poke it, hit the putter there, hit the ball on the putter there, the putter head will remain where it, unrotated because there's no force acting to try and rotate it. That's the balance point. But if you miss the ball slightly towards either side of the balance point, it does apply a rotational force to the putter head. So what that causes is, say it's coming in straight initially, if you hit it off axis, the putter head will rotate during the period that it's still touching the ball, and the ball will get energy transferred to it in a different direction to what you had intended. Now, the term moment of inertia is how much the putter head resists that turning force, and the higher the moment of inertia is, the more resistance to that turning force it has, which essentially boils down to, if you have a higher moment of inertia, the putter is less sensitive to, there's less hard requirement for you to hit it out the middle, and a little bit of deviation either way will make much less difference than it will on a putter that has a lower moment of inertia. Putter designers know this. They generally design putter heads to have quite high moments of inertia. The other club that moment of inertia really, really matters on is the driver, because you're hitting that ball so hard that it's going so far that tiny perturbations in its initial direction have quite large consequences when you look at where the ball lands. So the club in my bag, which has the highest moment of inertia by a long way is going to be my driver, much higher than any of my specialist putters. So that immediately starts to explain perhaps why the driver did so well. Generally speaking, those mallet-shaped putters are shaped the way they are because they're shaped like this, in fact, because these big, thick areas of metal around the outside move weight further out, which creates a higher moment of inertia. And the putter, the truss putter I showed you, which doesn't have these big wings on the back, they generally have a lower moment of inertia than the mallet. So that's why I say that the ability to line it up is more important than the moment of inertia, because subjectively I'm more capable of lining up the truss putter due to some physical features it's got and the way that I can do my posture in relation to those. I can get the truss putter lined up better than I can get the mallet putter lined up. I'm honestly trying my hardest with both, but I'm half a percentage point better at doing it with the truss putter than I am with the mallet putter. That's what the statistics tell me. And then there is going to be some error in where I hit the ball with either putter. And if that was dominant, then the mallet would perform better than the truss putter, but it doesn't. So I know for me that it's more important that I can line it up than it is to have a higher moment of inertia, at least for the testing sessions that I did. It's interesting to talk about how I do this with the driver, because with all the traditional putters, you adopt a sort of you get to try and get to where your head is vertically over the ball and the putter setup. And with the driver, I don't try and do that. I'm stood more like I was hitting a mid-iron shot rather than I'm hitting certainly I'm not stood as far away from the ball as if I was hitting a normal drive, but I'm certainly not getting over it like I do on a putt. And although I only missed one shot with the truss putter, I did miss that to the right of the hole, and the one shot I missed with the driver, I missed by not hitting it hard enough to get to the hole. So the line was actually better. It seems bizarre as it is to say it, that I'm marginally better at lining up a driver to hit a putt online than I am at lining up to hit a conventional putter online. It's interesting to speculate why that might be, but I haven't done the science to answer it definitively. My hypothesis, though, because I think it is important to tell you this, when I'm using the driver, I'm able to see the ground as a plane, the club face in its entirety and the ball, and I'm looking at it at an angle that I'm used to looking at things in normal life. It's not particularly weird viewpoint that I have. And what I think I'm doing is just using my normal skills of proprioception and my experience of looking at stuff at right angles in daily life, and putting the ball in a corner between the ground and the club face with it aimed at the hole. And I seem to be able to do that slightly more successfully than I'm able to do it when I'm looking top down, trying to do a sort of 2D puzzle. And one of the reasons for that, I suspect, is that it's never really a 2D puzzle. So if we look at this example putter, which is very accurately modelled, I hope you can make it out, but if not, I'll just tell you, this club face is at 4 degrees off being vertical. So that has important consequences, which I'll get into now. So if I'm stood directly vertically above the ball and the club face, and I see that this is lined up straight, that means that I will hit the ball in the direction I intend. So that's cool, but it's really difficult for me to know that I'm directly vertically above the ball and the club face. Now, the truss putter's features let me know when I'm at right angles to the putter head, but that still means I could be at right angles to the putter head and it's tilted a little bit. I'm exaggerating a lot, but it's tilted a bit away from me, away from my body, but I've leant further over, or it's tilted a bit towards my body and I've just not leant over far enough to get my head in the vertical position. And the reason that's an issue is if we turn the putter head one way or the other, suddenly that is not now the same straight as it was. It's going to send it a bit to the right in the case that you're tilted away, and a bit to the left in the case that it's tilted towards you. And for the shot that I missed with the truss putter, it was a real shock. I felt that I had set up exactly the same as all the others. I felt no doubt as I hit it that it was going to go towards and then into the hole. And it just started right and stayed right. And the only way that happens is because I had leant too far over. It's a pretty rare event, I suppose. Well, it was one putt out of 200 where it was significant enough for me to miss the hole. So yeah, it's a rare event, but I don't have a way to eliminate it. I don't seem to have that problem at all with getting the driver vertical. It's just because it's such a normal scene to be looking at. I think it is so natural to set it up correctly that I don't even have to think about it. If we're just considering the line that the ball starts on, I would say the driver has a slight advantage over the truss putter in that of the 200 putts, I didn't miss any for line compared to missing one with the truss putter. And if we're concerned about moment of inertia, then the driver has the higher moment of inertia than that putter, certainly. So let's move on to talking about pace. The pace will be correct if the putter head is moving at the speed you intend when you hit the ball. But there's an important caveat there, that the speed you intend needs to be different from one putter to the next, because different putter faces are more or less effective at transferring energy from the putter to the ball. Now, the driver is spectacularly efficient at transferring energy to the ball, to the point that the rules of golf limit how efficient any club can be, and drivers are right up against that limit. Putters are nowhere near, like normal putter is nowhere near that limit. And what that means is when I'm trying to hit a hit the ball gently with the driver, I'm in an area of an amount of swing, amount of motion of my body that is really hard to finally control to get exactly the pace that I want, because it's just so much more efficient at transferring energy to the ball. Whereas for the truss putter, and indeed any of the other traditional types of putter, they're deliberately made less efficient at transferring energy to the ball so that you don't need to have such fine control over how fast you're moving it to get exactly the result that you want. And I could really feel that it was a lot more difficult for me to get the pace right with the null putter than it was with the truss putter. However, there's always a however. How hard you need to hit it to get the ball to move the distance that you have in mind depends on rather more than just the club and the ball. It also depends on the surface that the putt is going over. Luckily, there's a way to quantify that. It's invented in, I think, 1935. It's been very widely used. I have the standard USGA device to measure how fast a putting surface is. It's called a stimp meter. And the way it works, is a ramp with a slot in it at a very precisely calculated distance. Put a ball in the slot, you lift the ramp up very gradually till the ball comes out the slot, then you hold it there, it rolls down the ramp, and you measure the distance from the bottom of the ramp to where the ball stops in feet, because it's an American invention. You do that both directions of the green in case you haven't found a perfectly flat part, so it kind of cancels out, or also cancels out for the grain of the green if there's grain on that grass. And you repeat the whole process a few times and take an average just to get it right. Courses for top level professional competitions will measure somewhere around 11, maybe 11 and a half. There'll be 12 and up if they want to be a really difficult course. But the most insane anyone's ever recorded, I think, was 15 feet. But generally speaking, the professional tours aim for their greens to be in the region from 11 to 12 and only go higher than 12 for a really important championship where they want it to be very difficult. Kind of course I'm typically playing on, because I'm not a professional golfer obviously, is going to measure around 10 in the summer months, I would expect. More like 7 to 8 at this time of year. And then also in my part of the world, in winter, it's not uncommon to have temporary greens, which means it's a painted around part of what's normally the fairway. And that's different grass to what's on the greens. It rolls slower, even if it's cut to the same length as a green. And so those are probably 5 or less on the stimp meter. There's a wide range of speeds around, but at the moment I need a putter that works in the region of, let's say, 7 as a target. 7 feet stimp would be a good place for it to be. Now, the putting mat I was measuring for testing, using for testing, I measured it before I did the tests, and it was somewhere between, it was a bit over 12, let's say 12 and a quarter feet, which puts it at the extremely fast end of things like that. That's what a pro tour course, when they've set it up to be hard for pro golfers, that's what that measures. What that all means, I suppose, is I certainly found keeping the pace correct easier with the truss putter than with my driver. But I need actually to hit it probably close to twice as hard in real life as I did on my putting mat, at least this time of year, perhaps even more than twice as hard. And so if I'm hitting at quite a comfortable speed to get a 6-foot putt on a stimp 12 and a half putting surface with the truss putter, what happens when I'm 35, 40 feet from the hole, which is much more typical for me, so I'm 40 feet from the hole and the green speed is 7, I have now to really whack it with that putter, and there's an upper bound to that region where you've got good control over your speed. And my concern is that with a proper putter right now on the greens I would be playing on, I wouldn't be able to hit it hard enough, or wouldn't be able to control the pace at the distances I need to hit it to my own satisfaction. For right now, I might be better with the driver, even though I found it hard to control on my putting mat, because my putting mat is excessively fast compared to the reality I'm going to encounter when we get to summer conditions, or if I were to get invited to some pro event for some reason. Can't see it happening. In those conditions, I would definitely, of the two, wish to use the more dedicated putter, because pace control is ultimately more important to me than the 0.5% difference in line control. If that was all that mattered, I'd be saying I'm going to use the driver for putting in the winter months when it starts to get uncontrollable because I'm hitting it too hard. And as the greens get faster, I'll switch to the truss putter. And when it starts to get uncontrollable because I can't hit it hard enough comfortably, I'll switch back to the driver. And we just go on like that forever. The other thing, though, that I've noticed subjectively from doing this testing is when I was using the driver for the putts, that was the only session where I hit 100 putts and didn't have any aches or pains, and then I hit another 100 putts and still didn't have any aches or pains. Every specialist putter, after about 30 putts, I'm getting a ache and tension and sort of soreness in my lower back on the left side, and it becomes actually painful after about the 75th putt. Not painful to the point where I can't putt, and not painful to where I can't putt successfully, because I did complete 200 putts in every one of those sessions. But it's sufficiently painful that that I really noticed it and would much prefer not to have it. So the fact that I didn't have that with the driver is itself interesting, because it's suggestive that it's the leaning over to get your eyes looking straight down on the putter head. That posture is itself problematic for me. Unless and until I am able to solve that problem, I'm better off, for comfort reasons, using the driver. So I've noticed that when I'm playing real golf, like not doing just a putting session, but playing actual golf, I get that tension in that part of my back, and it affects my full shots. It affects my overall scoring, and it just degrades as the round goes on. And until I did all this testing, I had assumed that it was just general fatigue, or that it was triggered by something I was doing in the full shot swing, or that it was just from the walking around. So actually the decision outcome that I have is, indeed, for the winter I'll try putting with my driver if I go out to play golf at all, which I may or may not do. I'm also going to try and build a sort of more puttery putter head, something that's not immediately a driver, so that it has a lower efficiency of transfer of energy, but that lets me have the same posture at setup that I have with the driver for putting, so that when I get to the summer, I can continue to set up and sight and play in comfort like that. Now, all of this has been a single person test. Like, I want to know what I should do for my putting. Please don't assume that any of this would be true for you and blindly start using a driver for putting. I've no reason to believe that the things that affect me should affect anyone else, because the left side of my body has been smashed up and rebuilt 4 or 5 times at this point. I've broken all the ribs down there on the back, and they've healed up, but very possibly I've lost some articulation, and the pain I'm getting is due to that. I've also smashed up my left shoulder and had that surgically pieced back together, and it's possible that the reason that I have some problem with the putting posture is related to that, or the asymmetry that now exists between my left and right shoulder skeletal structures. I'm more inclined to assume it's that than to assume that everyone else has been putting wrong for the last 70 years. However, until I put this out, no one's able to say or not whether they have thought the same thing. If I put this out and you're all like, yeah, we get that pain too, and it is affecting our scores, and we are hurting ourselves putting that way, and we're intrigued, can you show me how to use the driver for putting? Let me know in the comments, and I will do a tutorial on how to putt with driver if anyone cares. As I say, I have 2 reasons for not wanting to do it. One is it's a bunch of work and I'm relatively lazy, and the other is in order to do it, I'm going to have to talk about aiming and other things that in a way that works for me. But I would say it's already a small audience for that. And I will also say, if you're happy with how you part, you really shouldn't watch it. So not only is it limited to the minority of people who are into golf and putting, it's a real minority of those who should even consider watching a video on how to putt with a driver, is the current information I have. As I say, if there's interest, I'll do it. If there's not, though, I won't, because it would be a waste of everyone's time. Anyway, thank you for watching and listening. There'll be other episodes, I'm sure. I mean, I would expect, if I'm successful in designing a putt head and making a club that gives me that posture but lets me have a bit more pace control, I'll do a video about that at some point if it happens. And yes, if you have any thoughts on this, please comment below. Thank you for your time. Cheerio.